Rose was deep in her investigation, piecing together the bits of information she had gathered about the Black Dawn's activities when a crucial piece of intel reached her. Tonight, under the cover of darkness, the cult was planning to move a large shipment of the amplifying crystals. They were all gathered in a warehouse in the district, ready for transport. Rose knew this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. If the city guard could seize those crystals, it would deal a significant blow to the Black Dawn's operations. She quickly passed the information along to her contacts in the guard, urging them to act swiftly. She provided them with all the details: the location of the warehouse, the expected number of cult members, any defensive measures they might encounter. The guard mobilized quickly, assembling a strike force to raid the warehouse. Rose watched from the shadows as they moved in, her heart pounding with anticipation. But just as the guards were about to breach the warehouse, something unexpected happened. A shimmering portal opened in the middle of the space, its edges crackling with dark energy. And through that portal stepped a figure that made Rose's blood run cold. Draven, his face still bearing the scars from their last encounter, flanked by his loyal followers. The city guards, caught off guard by this sudden appearance, hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, Draven and his lackeys sprang into action. They moved with terrifying efficiency, wielding dark magic to cut a path through the guards. They grabbed the crates of crystals, tossing them through the portal with practiced speed. Rose watched in horror as the Black Dawn members followed suit, leaping through the portal after their ill-gotten gains. She could see the triumph on their faces, the smug satisfaction of a plan well executed. The city guards rallied, trying to mount a defense, but it was too late. With a final mocking salute, Draven stepped back through the portal, which snapped shut behind him, cutting off any chance of pursuit. In the sudden silence of the warehouse, Rose could hear the groans of the injured guards, the frustrated curses of those who had seen victory slip through their fingers. She emerged from her hiding spot, moving to help the wounded, her mind racing. Draven's appearance changed everything. It confirmed the Black Dawn's connection to Ultranacious and raised the stakes to a whole new level. If they had access to that kind of portal magic, if they could come and go as they pleased, the threat was greater than Rose had ever imagined. She needed to regroup, to rethink her strategy. The Black Dawn had outmaneuvered her this time, but Rose was nothing if not adaptable. As she helped the guards secure the warehouse and tend to the injured, Rose's mind was already spinning with new plans, new approaches. Draven might have won this round, but the fight was far from over. Rose would find a way to stop him, to stop the Black Dawn, no matter what it took. The game had changed, but Rose's determination only burned brighter. She would find a way. She had to. After the disastrous raid on the warehouse, where the Black Dawn managed to escape with the crystals through a portal, Rose was left with more questions than answers. She knew she needed to find out more about the cult's operations, and fast. She started by examining the warehouse itself. Though the Black Dawn had been thorough in their escape, they had left behind some clues. Rose found traces of a strange, dark residue near where the portal had opened. She collected a sample, hoping to have it analysed by some of her contacts in the magical community. She also discovered a discarded piece of parchment, half-burned and trampled underfoot in the chaos of the raid. On it were a series of numbers and symbols, along with a crude map. The map seemed to indicate a location in the mountains outside the city, an area known for its rich mineral deposits. Realization dawned on Rose. This must be where the Black Dawn was mining the crystals. The numbers and symbols likely represented coordinates or a code of some kind. Armed with this new lead, Rose set out to investigate the mountain location. She travelled under the guise of a prospector, using her knowledge of geology and mineralogy, picked up during her time in the forest village, to blend in with the other miners and fortune seekers in the area. Her instincts proved correct. Deep in the mountains, she found evidence of the Black Dawn's mining operation, the same dark residue from the warehouse, discarded equipment bearing the cult's symbols, and, most importantly, the remains of the amplifying crystals themselves. Rose stood at the edge of the mining site, the crystal dust crunching beneath her boots. The Black Dawn had been thorough in their excavation, leaving behind a gaping wound in the earth, a testament to their hunger for the amplifying crystals. But they hadn't been perfect. As Rose picked her way through the debris, she found traces of their presence: broken tools, scraps of clothing, the ashes of campfires long cold. Each piece told a story, and Rose was determined to read them all. She was deep in concentration examining a discarded pickaxe when a fluttering piece of paper caught her eye. It was lodged beneath a rock, as if it had been hastily hidden or accidentally dropped. Rose pulled it free, smoothing out the creases. It was a map, crudely drawn but detailed. It showed a series of locations, each marked with a strange symbol. One of the symbols, she realized with a start, perfectly matched the rune she'd seen on the Black Dawn's robes. But it was the words scrawled at the bottom of the map that made her heart race. Nexus Point, it read. Realm of Shadowfall. Shadowfall. Rose had heard whispers of that realm, stories told by travellers in dimly lit taverns. They spoke of a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where strange magic seeped through like a fog. If the Black Dawn was active in Shadowfall, the implications were dire. With access to the unusual energies of that realm, combined with the amplifying power of the crystals, there was no telling what they might be capable of. Rose knew she couldn't ignore this lead. She had to follow the trail, no matter where it led. She pocketed the map and made her way out of the mining site, her mind already racing ahead. She would need to arrange passage to Shadowfall, a task that would require all her connections and persuasive skills. But first she needed to prepare. Shadowfall was known to be treacherous, its very environment hostile to outsiders. Rose would need to be at the top of her game, ready for anything. As she journeyed back to the city, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the cusp of something big. The Black Dawn's activities in Shadowfall could be the key to unraveling their entire operation. It was a daunting prospect, but Rose had never been one to shy away from a challenge. In the bustling streets of the city, Rose set about making her preparations. She visited trusted contacts, calling in old favours and making new deals. She gathered supplies, focusing on items that would be useful in the unpredictable environment of Shadowfall. She also spent time honing her skills, practicing her fire magic and her combat techniques. She had a feeling she would need every tool at her disposal in the realm ahead. Finally, with her preparations complete and her passage secured, Rose stood before the shimmering portal that would take her to Shadowfall. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her mission settling on her shoulders. She didn't know what awaited her on the other side, what dangers or discoveries lay ahead, but she knew she was ready to face them. With a final determined nod, Rose stepped through the portal, the flames of her resolve burning bright. Shadowfall awaited, and with it, the next chapter in her relentless pursuit of the Black Dawn. Rose stepped out of the portal, the shift in atmosphere immediate and palpable. The air in Shadowfall was thick and heavy, carrying a chill that seemed to seep into her very bones. The sky above was a swirling mass of greys and deep purples, the sun a distant hazy orb that cast an eerie twilight over the landscape. She found herself on the outskirts of a sprawling city, its architecture a mix of Gothic spires and crumbling ruins. The buildings seemed to lean and twist in unnatural angles, as if warped by the strange energies that permeated the realm. The streets were eerily quiet, the few figures that moved about doing so with a furtive, hurried gait. They kept their heads down and their cloaks pulled tight, as if trying to avoid attracting attention. Rose knew she would need to be cautious here. Shadowfall was known as a haven for those who dealt in dark magics and illicit trades. The authorities, such as they were, turned a blind eye to most activities, making it a perfect place for a group like the Black Dawn to operate. She began to make her way into the city, keeping to the shadows and observing her surroundings carefully. She noted the symbols etched into doorways and carved into walls, some of them matching those she'd seen in the Black Dawn's communications. As she ventured deeper into the city, Rose started to get a sense of its layout. There seemed to be distinct districts, each with its own unique atmosphere. There was the market district, where vendors hawked exotic wares from stalls draped in rich, dark fabrics. The air here was thick with the scent of incense and the murmur of hushed negotiations. Then there were the residential areas, where crumbling tenements loomed over narrow, twisting streets. The few people Rose saw here scurried about their business, avoiding eye contact and keeping to the shadows. But it was the district at the city's heart that drew Rose's attention. Here the buildings were grander, the architecture more ornate. The air thrummed with power, a palpable energy that made Rose's skin tingle. This, she suspected, was where she would find the Black Dawn. As she approached the district's edge, Rose noticed an increase in security. Hooded figures patrolled the streets, their posture and bearing suggesting military training. They carried strange, arcane weapons that glowed with a sickly light. Rose knew she would need to be smart about this. She couldn't just barge in and start asking questions. She needed to find a way to infiltrate the district, to gather information without drawing attention to herself. She recalled a technique she'd learned from her time in the city, using disguise and misdirection to blend in with her surroundings. With a few subtle alterations to her appearance and bearing, Rose transformed herself into just another hooded figure, moving about the district. As she slipped into the shadows and began to explore, Rose could feel the weight of the task before her. Somewhere in this twisting labyrinth of dark magic and shadowy dealings, the Black Dawn was plotting their next move. Rose moved through the shadowed streets of the district, her disguise allowing her to blend in with the hooded figures that seemed to be everywhere. She kept her eyes and ears open, listening for any mention of the Black Dawn or their activities. As she turned a corner, she found herself in a small, dimly lit plaza. In the center stood a fountain, its waters an inky black that seemed to absorb the light around it. Huddled around this dark landmark were a group of figures, their whispers carrying an urgency that piqued Rose's interest. She drifted closer, straining to catch their conversation without drawing attention to herself. "The shipment arrives tonight," one of the figures was saying, his voice low and raspy. "The master wants everything prepared for the ritual." "What about the intruder?" another voice asked, this one feminine and sharp. "The one who interfered with the operation in the other realm?" Rose's heart skipped a beat. They were talking about her. The first figure waved a dismissive hand. "The master has a plan for dealing with her. She won't be a problem for much longer." Rose felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold air of Shadowfall. The Black Dawn knew she was coming. They were preparing for her. But she also now had valuable information. A shipment, arriving tonight. A ritual of some kind. If she could intercept that shipment, disrupt their plans. She slipped away from the plaza, her mind racing. She needed to find out more about this shipment, what it contained, where it was coming from, how it was being transported. Her first stop was the market district. If anything illicit was moving through the city, chances were someone there would know about it. Rose spent hours moving among the stalls, listening to the chatter of the vendors and their customers, dropping subtle questions when she could. Piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. The shipment was coming in by airship, under cover of darkness. It contained more of the amplifying crystals, along with other rare and dangerous magical components. Its destination was a warehouse on the edge of the district, heavily guarded and warded. Rose knew she would need to act fast. She had only a few hours until nightfall, until the shipment was due to arrive. She began to form a plan. She would need to find a way to infiltrate the warehouse, to get close to the shipment. She would need to deal with the guards, bypass the wards, and she would need to do it all without alerting the Black Dawn to her presence. It was a tall order, but Rose was nothing if not resourceful. As the shadows of Shadowfall lengthened and the eerie twilight deepened into true night, Rose made her preparations. She gathered her equipment, checked and double-checked her supplies. She ran through her plan in her mind, visualizing each step, each potential complication. And then, as the first stars began to glimmer in the strange, swirling sky of Shadowfall, Rose set out. The warehouse loomed before her, a hulking shape in the darkness. She could see the guards patrolling its perimeter, could feel the hum of the wards that protected it. But Rose was ready. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, melting into the shadows. It was time to put her plan into action. Rose moved silently through the shadows, her every sense heightened, her body tensed for action. She was getting close to the warehouse now, could see the flicker of arcane wards and the movement of guards ahead. She was just about to make her move, to slip past the guards and begin her infiltration, when a hand suddenly grasped her arm, pulling her back into the deeper shadows. Rose whirled, her whip instantly in her hand, ready to strike, but she stopped short when she saw who had grabbed her. It was a woman, tall and lithe, with golden hair that seemed to glow even in the dim light of the alley. Her eyes were a piercing blue, and they held a look of urgent warning. "Stop," the woman whispered, her voice low and intense. "It's a trap." Rose stared at her, her mind racing. Who was this woman? How did she know about the trap? And why was she helping her? The woman seemed to sense her questions. "There's no time to explain," she said quickly. "The Black Dawn knows you're coming. They've set up an ambush inside the warehouse. If you go in there, you'll be walking straight into their hands." Rose felt a chill run through her. She had suspected the Black Dawn might be prepared for her, but to hear it confirmed was another matter entirely. "How do you know this?" she asked, her voice tense. The woman glanced around as if checking for listeners. "I have my sources," she said. "Let's just say I'm no friend of the Black Dawn." Rose studied her, trying to read her intentions. The woman seemed sincere, her urgency genuine, and Rose's instincts, honed over years of fighting and survival, told her this was not a deception. "All right," she said finally, lowering her whip. "What do you suggest?" The woman's lips curved into a small, grim smile. "We need to be smarter than them," she said. "They're expecting you to come in through the front, so that's exactly what we won't do." She gestured for Rose to follow her, moving deeper into the alley. "I know another way in," she said over her shoulder. "A way they won't be watching." Rose hesitated for just a moment, then followed. She didn't fully trust this mysterious woman, but she trusted the Black Dawn even less. And if there was even a chance, this could help her stop them. The woman led her through a maze of back alleys and abandoned buildings, always seeming to know just where to turn, which shadows to slip through. Rose had to admire her skill, even as she remained wary. Finally, they came to a halt beside a nondescript wall. The woman ran her hands over the bricks, seeming to search for something. Then, with a satisfied nod, she pressed a sequence of bricks in a specific order. To Rose's amazement, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. The woman gestured for her to enter. "This will take you into the warehouse," she said. "But be careful. Even with this advantage, the Black Dawn is not to be underestimated." Rose nodded, then paused. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. The woman's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say we have a common enemy," she said, "and I think you might be the key to stopping them." With that, she melted back into the shadows, leaving Rose alone at the entrance to the passage. Rose took a deep breath, then stepped forward. The passage was dark and narrow, the air thick with the scent of mold and ancient dust. But Rose didn't hesitate. With the mysterious woman's warning ringing in her ears and the weight of her mission pressing on her shoulders, she forged ahead. Rose moved swiftly through the dark, narrow passage, her senses on high alert. She could hear the muffled sounds of activity from the warehouse beyond, the clank of machinery and the low murmur of voices. She emerged into a dimly lit corner of the warehouse, crouching behind a stack of crates to take in her surroundings. The space was vast, filled with towering shelves and piles of arcane equipment. In the center, a group of hooded figures were gathered around a large, glowing object, the shipment of amplifying crystals. Rose's eyes narrowed. She had to act fast before they could use those crystals for whatever nefarious purpose they had planned. She was just about to make her move when a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. The hooded figures whirled, their attention drawn to a disturbance at the far end of the space. Rose seized her chance. She leapt from her hiding place, her whip already in motion. It lashed out, wrapping around the nearest Black Dawn member and sending them crashing to the ground. Chaos erupted. The Black Dawn members scattered, some reaching for weapons, others beginning to chant dark incantations. Rose was a whirlwind of motion, her whip and her fire magic working in tandem to take down her enemies. But there were too many of them. For every one she felled, two more seemed to take their place. Rose found herself being pushed back, the tide of the battle turning against her. Just as things seemed most dire, a new figure burst into the fray. It was the blonde woman from before, her hair shining like a beacon in the gloom. But now Rose could see her features clearly, the delicate point of her ears, the otherworldly grace of her movements. She was an elf, but not like any Rose had ever seen. The woman fought like a demon, her twin blades flashing in the dim light. She moved to stand back to back with Rose, the two of them facing down the horde of Black Dawn together. "Who are you?" Rose managed to shout over the din of battle. The woman flashed her a grin. "Call me Lyra," she said. "I'll explain later. For now, let's focus on not dying." Rose couldn't argue with that. With Lyra at her side, she redoubled her efforts, pushing back against the onslaught of dark magic and gleaming blades. Together they fought their way to the center of the warehouse, to the glowing pile of crystals. Rose knew they had to be destroyed. But how? As if reading her thoughts, Lyra tossed her one of her blades. "Together," she said, her voice strained with effort. "On my mark." Rose nodded, understanding. She gathered her fire, letting it build within her until it was a roaring inferno. "Now!" Lyra shouted. As one, they brought their blades down on the crystals. At the same moment, Rose released her fire, pouring all her power into the strike. The resulting explosion was cataclysmic. A wave of energy burst outward, knocking friend and foe alike off their feet. The crystals shattered, their glow extinguished, their power dissipating in a rush of arcane wind. In the sudden silence that followed, Rose and Lyra stood amidst the wreckage, breathing hard. The Black Dawn lay strewn about them, unconscious or groaning in pain. "Well," Lyra said, dusting herself off, "that was bracing." Rose couldn't help but laugh, the adrenaline of the fight still singing in her veins. "You could say that." She turned to Lyra, her expression growing serious. "Thank you," she said. "I wouldn't have made it without you." Lyra waved a hand dismissively, but there was a warmth in her eyes. "You would have figured something out. You strike me as the resourceful type." Rose shook her head, smiling. "Still, I owe you one." "In that case," Lyra said, her tone turning businesslike, "perhaps we should discuss our next move, because I have a feeling this is far from over." Rose nodded, her gaze hardening. "The Black Dawn will be back, and we need to be ready." Together, Rose and Lyra strode out of the ruins of the warehouse, their silhouettes outlined by the eerie twilight of Shadowfall. A new partnership had been forged in the heat of battle, and the Black Dawn had just made two very dangerous enemies.